Imagine waking up one morning, reaching for your phone the way you always do, opening up a simple trading app just to check on a small investment you made the night before. You expect to see the $2,000 you deposited. Instead, you see a number so large that your brain refuses to process it. You blink. You rub your eyes. You close the app and open it again. But the number is still there. $1 million. Sitting right there in your account. Money that did not exist 12 hours ago. Money that nobody sent you. Money that no bank approved. Money that simply appeared out of thin air because a few lines of computer code made a mistake that nobody at one of the biggest financial technology companies in America bothered to catch. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is not a movie plot. This actually happened. And what these ordinary Americans did with that money would expose one of the most embarrassing failures in modern financial technology, trigger federal investigations, destroy lives, create overnight fortunes, and reveal a truth about the American financial system that the people in charge have been trying to bury ever since. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how something like this could happen, you have to go back to 2013, to a small office in California where two young men who had met as classmates at Stanford University were about to launch a product that would change the American financial landscape forever. For generations, the stock market had operated like a private club. If you wanted to buy shares in a company, you needed a brokerage account with thousands of dollars in minimum deposits. Every trade came with a commission fee of $10, $20, sometimes $40. If you were a schoolteacher in Ohio, a truck driver in Tennessee, or a retired postal worker in Florida, the stock market was not designed for you. It was designed for people who already had money. The two Stanford graduates believed this was fundamentally unfair, so they built an app, eliminated the commission fees, removed the minimum deposits, and gave it a name that told you everything about their mission. They called it Robinhood. And within a few short years, that app would become the most downloaded financial product in America, with over 10 million users and a valuation in the billions of dollars. But what nobody outside the company knew, what would not be discovered until it was almost too late, was that hidden deep inside the code of this revolutionary app was a flaw so dangerous that it would soon hand out millions of dollars to people who had no business receiving it. And the first person to find it was not a hacker. He was not a programmer. He was a 22-year-old kid in a bedroom in the Midwest. His name, for the purposes of this story, was Danny Kowalski. Danny was not what you would call ambitious. He had dropped out of community college about a year and a half earlier, was working a part-time job at a warehouse, and spent most of his evenings on an internet forum called Wall Street Bets, a chaotic corner of the internet where amateur traders gathered to brag about reckless bets, mock spectacular losses, and search for any edge they could find in the markets. Most of the people on that forum were not serious investors. They were gamblers. They treated the stock market like a casino. And Danny fit right in. He had opened a Robinhood account about 6 months earlier with a small deposit, mostly losing money on impulsive trades, when he stumbled into something that nobody else seemed to have noticed. To understand what Danny found, you need to understand a concept called margin. Margin is borrowed money. When you open a margin account with any brokerage in America, the platform lends you additional funds so you can make larger trades than your own cash would allow. If you deposit $2,000 and the platform offers 2-to-1 leverage, you can trade with $4,000. The extra $2,000 is a loan, and it comes with strict rules, limits, and safeguards. Every major brokerage uses sophisticated systems to calculate exactly how much margin each user is entitled to, and these calculations happen in real time. The math has to be perfect, because if someone borrows too much and their trades go bad, the brokerage is on the hook for the losses. At Robinhood, the math was not perfect. There was a flaw, a quiet, subtle miscalculation in how the software handled a specific type of trade involving stock options. When a user bought shares using borrowed margin and then sold certain options contracts against those shares, the system was supposed to recognize that the borrowed money had already been used. But it did not. Instead, it treated the proceeds from the option sale as new, free cash, cash that could be used to borrow even more margin, which could be used to buy more shares, which could be used to sell more options. It was a loop, an infinite loop, with no ceiling, no circuit breaker, no alarm that went off when the numbers stopped making sense. And Danny Kowalski, sitting in his bedroom one evening in the fall of 2019, accidentally discovered it. The first time it happened, Danny thought it was a glitch in the display. He had deposited $2,000 into his account that morning, made a few experimental trades involving options, and then refreshed the app to check his balance. Instead of 2,000, the buying power showed 20,000. He laughed, took a screenshot, and assumed it would correct itself within a few minutes. But it did not correct itself. So Danny ran the same sequence of trades again, just to see what would happen. This time the buying power jumped to 80,000. He tried it a third time. The number climbed past 200,000. By midnight, Danny was looking at a Robinhood account with $1 million in available trading capital, generated entirely from a $2,000 deposit and a few clicks of his thumb. He sat in the dark of his bedroom staring at his phone, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. And he did what any 22-year-old in his position would do. He went to the internet to tell people. The post he made on Wall Street Bets that night was short, casual, almost playful. He described the steps he had taken. He posted screenshots of the inflated balance. And he gave the exploit a name that would soon be quoted in financial publications around the world. He called it the infinite money cheat code. Within hours, the post had thousands of upvotes. Within a day, it had spread across the platform like wildfire. And within 48 hours, dozens of other users had reproduced the exploit on their own accounts. Some of them turned $500 deposits into trading positions worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The euphoria on the forum was overwhelming. People were talking about quitting their jobs, paying off their mortgages, becoming overnight millionaires. Nobody seemed to be asking the obvious question: where was this money actually coming from? And what would happen when Robinhood figured out what was going on? But while the loud traders on Wall Street Bets were celebrating, posting screenshots, and daring each other to push the exploit even further, something quieter and far more interesting was happening in homes across the country. A different kind of trader was finding the same glitch. Not the reckless gamblers, but a small group of careful, patient, methodical people who saw the exploit not as a chance to gamble, but as a chance to extract. One of those people was a man we will call Frank Dawson. Frank was 34 years old, married, living in a quiet suburb outside Dallas, Texas. He worked as a construction project manager, made a decent middle-class income, had a mortgage, a car payment, and a 6-year-old daughter named Lily. Frank was not a thrill seeker. He was not the kind of man who took big risks with his money. But he had been trading on Robinhood for about 2 years, mostly small positions, mostly breaking even, and he had been quietly frustrated for a long time about how hard it seemed to be for someone like him to actually get ahead financially. When Frank saw Danny's post about the infinite money cheat code, he did not jump in. He spent 2 full days reading every comment, studying the screenshots, trying to understand the mechanics. He even opened a spreadsheet and worked through the math himself. And when he was finally convinced it was real, he made a decision that would change the trajectory of his entire life. But Frank was not going to use the glitch the way the Wall Street Bets crowd was using it. Frank had a plan. A careful, disciplined, almost surgical plan. And it would either make him wealthy beyond his wildest dreams, or it would destroy everything he had ever built. Frank started small. He deposited $3,000 of his own money into his Robinhood account and began executing the sequence of trades that Danny had described. Within the first hour, his buying power had grown to $15,000. By the end of the day, it was over $200,000. By the next morning, Frank Dawson, a construction manager from suburban Texas with $3,000 to his name, was sitting on over $1.2 million in trading capital. He stared at the number on his phone for a long time. His hands were shaking. His wife was in the next room watching television, and she had no idea what had just happened. And in that moment, Frank was faced with a choice that most people will never have to make. He could walk away. He could close the app, never log in again, and pretend none of this had ever happened. Or he could step through the door that the glitch had opened, knowing full well that he might never come back out. Frank stepped through the door, but he did not do what Danny Kowalski had done. Danny, caught up in the rush of his discovery, had used his inflated buying power to make enormous bets on volatile stocks, swinging for the fences, treating the glitched money like Monopoly cash. Frank took a completely different approach. He used the buying power to purchase large positions in stable blue-chip stocks, companies whose prices barely moved from day to day. And then, slowly, carefully, methodically, Over the course of several days, he began selling those positions and withdrawing the profits into his personal bank account. He did not withdraw it all at once. That would have triggered alarms. He withdrew small amounts. 20,000 here, 30,000 there. He was not trying to get rich overnight. He was trying to get the money out of the system and into a place where the glitch could not take it back. And for several days, it worked. The withdrawals went through. The money appeared in his bank account. Real money. Spendable money. Money he could walk into the bank and hold in his hands if he wanted to. Frank was not the only one doing this. Across the country, a small network of quiet, careful traders was doing exactly the same thing. They were not posting on Reddit. They were not bragging. They were silently, methodically extracting money from a system that was bleeding cash through a hole in its own code. And nobody at Robinhood, nobody on Wall Street, nobody in Washington had any idea it was happening. While Frank and the quiet traders were carefully extracting their fortunes, the loud side of the story was about to deliver one of the most spectacular financial disasters in the history of the internet. Danny Kowalski had used his inflated buying power to build a single massive position worth nearly $2 million in one volatile stock. Other Wall Street Bets users were doing the same, some of them leveraging their accounts to absurd levels, turning $500 deposits into positions worth hundreds of thousands. The forum had become a frenzy of euphoria. Posts flooded in every hour from users showing inflated balances, daring each other to go bigger. And for a few days, the trades actually worked. Profits were piling up. Accounts were swelling. People were already mentally spending the money. But the thing about leverage trading is that it amplifies everything. It amplifies your gains when things go well, and it amplifies your losses when things go badly. And when you are trading with money generated by a software error, money with no real backing, no real collateral, no real safety net, the amplification is not just doubled or tripled. It is multiplied to a degree that can turn a small market movement into a total financial collapse in a matter of minutes. On a Thursday afternoon in November of 2019, the reckoning arrived. The stocks the glitch traders had piled into began moving in the wrong direction. Not dramatically, just a normal, routine dip of a few percentage points. The kind of movement that happens in the market every single day without anyone noticing. But for traders leveraged at 50 to 1 or 100 to 1, a small dip was not small at all. It was the end of everything. Danny Kowalski watched his account implode in real time. The position he had spent days carefully building disintegrated in less than an hour. His account balance, which had shown nearly $2 million that morning, plummeted through zero and kept falling. By the time the dust settled, Danny did not just have nothing. He owed Robinhood over $700,000. His account balance was negative $732,000, to be exact. He posted one final screenshot to Wall Street Bets. The caption was just 3 words. "I am ruined." The forum, which had cheered him on just days earlier, went silent. Some users expressed sympathy. Others said exactly what they had been warning all along, that free money does not exist, that leverage is a weapon that fires in both directions. Danny Kowalski, 22 years old, was now deeper in debt than most Americans accumulate over an entire lifetime. And he was not alone. Across the country, the same scene was playing out in bedrooms and basements and college dorm rooms. Account after account collapsed. Negative balance after negative balance appeared. The screenshots that had been celebrated just days earlier as proof of life-changing fortune were now being deleted, hidden, denied. The party was over. And by the next morning, the story had hit the financial press. Bloomberg ran the headline first, then Forbes, then CNBC. And suddenly the entire country was talking about an app that had accidentally handed out millions of dollars to amateur traders, some of whom had won big and walked away, and many of whom had lost everything they had, and then some. Inside Robinhood's headquarters, the mood was best described as panic. Engineers were working around the clock to patch the vulnerability. Lawyers were drafting damage control statements. Executives were huddling in conference rooms trying to figure out how to handle a crisis that nobody had seen coming and nobody knew how to contain. The company's first public statement was a masterpiece of corporate deflection. It used the word small 3 times. It used the word contained twice. It did not include any specific dollar figures. It did not mention how long the vulnerability had been active. And it absolutely did not mention what multiple sources inside the company would later reveal. that engineers had raised concerns about the margin calculation system months before the glitch was publicly discovered. Those warnings had been filed away, ignored, forgotten in the race to grow, the race to add more users, the race to release more features, the race that defines every major Silicon Valley company in the modern era. And now that race had a price tag. Internal estimates that would later leak to financial journalists put the total financial exposure from the glitch at somewhere between $5 and $10 million. Some estimates went even higher. But the public number that Robinhood eventually disclosed was a fraction of that. The truth, like so many truths in the world of corporate finance, was buried in the gap between what was admitted and what actually happened. Then came the federal regulators. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened an inquiry. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, known as FINRA, opened another. But the response was not the kind of dramatic, headline-grabbing investigation the public might have expected. There were no press conferences, no emergency orders, no raids on Robinhood's offices. The regulatory response unfolded over months and years in the form of fines, settlements, and consent orders buried in dense legal documents that the average American would never read. FINRA fined Robinhood $1.25 million for failures related to options trading reviews. The SEC followed with additional actions. And eventually, in June of 2021, FINRA hit Robinhood with a $70 million penalty, the largest fine in the regulator's history. But here's the part nobody talked about. That $70 million fine was not specifically about the infinite money glitch. It covered a wide range of issues, including system outages, misleading information given to customers, and supervisory failures. The glitch itself, the single most embarrassing software failure in the company's history, was quietly folded into the broader pattern of negligence and absorbed into the regulatory record. There was no congressional hearing. There was no public reckoning. There were no executives forced to explain under oath how their software had handed out millions of dollars to anyone clever enough to find the right sequence of button presses. The story was managed, contained, moved off the front page as quickly as possible. And the people who had been caught in the middle of it, the winners and the losers, were left to deal with the consequences on their own. For Danny Kowalski, the consequences were devastating. Robinhood initially pursued him for the negative balance, sending demand letters and threatening legal action. But the company eventually backed off, recognizing that suing a 22-year-old with no assets over a debt created by their own software failure would generate more bad press than it was worth. Danny's account was closed. The negative balance was written off, and Danny was left with nothing. No money, no trading account, and a story that would follow him around the internet for years. Months later, he gave an anonymous interview to a financial journalist and said something that has stayed with me. He said the worst part was not the money. The worst part was that for about 72 hours, he had genuinely believed his life was about to change forever. He had believed he had found a way out of the grind, that the universe had finally cracked open a window just for him. And then the window had slammed shut so hard it nearly broke him. For Frank Dawson, the story went very differently. In the weeks after the crash, Frank waited for the phone call. He waited for the letter. He waited for the knock on the door. But it never came. Robinhood closed his account without explanation, which he had expected. But the money in his bank account remained untouched. No legal demand. No clawback. No communication of any kind. Frank consulted with a lawyer, paying for a single one-hour session out of pocket. And what the lawyer told him surprised him. The lawyer explained that in most cases involving software errors at financial institutions, the company's primary remedy is to reverse transactions within the platform itself. Once money has been withdrawn to an external bank account, recovering it becomes significantly more difficult, especially when the user did not engage in any form of hacking, fraud, or unauthorized access. Frank had used the app exactly as the app allowed him to use it. He had not broken into any system. He had not manipulated any code. He had simply executed trades that the platform approved, and then he had withdrawn funds that the platform authorized. The error was Robinhood's, not Frank's, and the legal burden of recovering funds lost through a company's own negligence is substantially higher than most people realize. Frank did not spend the money right away. He was afraid for months that it would be taken back, that some federal agent would show up at his door, that his bank would freeze his account. But none of that ever happened. Slowly, carefully, he began to use it. He paid off his truck. He put a chunk into a college savings fund for his daughter. He took his wife on a vacation, the first real vacation they had taken since their honeymoon. He did not tell anyone where the money came from. As far as his family knew, he had made some smart investments that had paid off better than expected. And in a strange way, that was true. He had made a smart decision. Just not the kind of smart decision any financial advisor would ever recommend. There was one more story that emerged from this whole affair, and in many ways it is the one that captures the truth of what really happened. In the weeks after the glitch became public, a journalist tracked down another trader who had used the exploit, a man in his late 40s from Virginia, a small business owner who ran a landscaping company with 6 employees. We will call him Robert Chin. Robert had found the glitch independently before Danny Kowalski's post ever went viral. He had noticed the margin anomaly while experimenting with option strategies and had quietly used it to withdraw approximately $180,000 over a period of 3 weeks. When the journalist asked Robert if he felt guilty about what he had done, Robert was silent for a long moment. Then he said something the journalist later described as the most honest thing anyone involved in the story had said. Robert said he had spent his entire adult life playing by the rules. He had paid his taxes. He had treated his employees fairly. He had never cheated anyone. And in return, the system had given him a bad back, a second mortgage, and the growing realization that he would probably never be able to retire. He said that when the glitch appeared, it felt like the universe had made an accounting error in his favor for once, and he was not about to send it back. He said he understood that some people would judge him for that, and he could live with it, because he had spent 47 years being judged by a system that had never once judged itself. The Robinhood Infinite Money glitch was patched in November of 2019. The accounts were closed. The fines were paid. The press releases were issued. And the world moved on. Within months, the pandemic would sweep across the globe, and Robinhood would experience another massive surge in users as millions of Americans, stuck at home with stimulus checks and nothing to do, turned to the stock market for the first time. The company would go on to play a central role in the GameStop trading frenzy of January 2021, another episode that would raise serious questions about its practices. Robinhood would eventually go public in July of 2021, and its founders would become billionaires on paper. The promise that had launched the company, the idea that ordinary Americans deserved a fair shot at the financial markets, would continue to be the centerpiece of its marketing even as lawsuits piled up and regulatory actions multiplied. And somewhere in America, in suburbs and small towns and mid-sized cities, the people who had walked through the door the glitch had opened were living their lives with money the system had never intended them to have. Some of them lost everything. Some of them broke even. And some of them, the quiet ones, the careful ones, the ones who had the discipline to take what the glitch offered and walk away before the walls closed in, they came out ahead. Not because they were smarter than everyone else. Not because they deserved it more. But because for one brief, unrepeatable moment, the code that governed the flow of money in America made a mistake, and they happened to be standing in the right place when the error paid out. This story is not really about a glitch. It is about a system built on trust, on the assumption that the people in charge know what they are doing, that the technology is solid, that the safeguards are in place. And every once in a while, when a crack appears in that system, we get a glimpse of what it actually looks like underneath. We get to see that the people in charge are just people. The technology is just code. And the safeguards, the ones we have been told to trust with our retirement savings, our college funds, our entire financial futures, are only as good as the engineers who built them and the executives who decided how much testing was enough. Now I want to hear from you. If you had found that glitch, if you had been sitting at your kitchen table one evening and discovered that an app on your phone was willing to hand you $1 million through a crack in its own code, what would you have done? Would you have walked away? Would you have reported it to the company? Or would you have done exactly what Frank and Robert did? There is no wrong answer, but I think the honest answer tells you a lot about how you really feel about the system we all live inside. Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, because the next billion-dollar business mistake is even more unbelievable.